Welcome to the Dad Central Show, hosted by Ed Gow Jr. and Drew Solon. We know dads want to see their kids succeed, but they don't always know how to get there. This show gives dads the tools they need to raise confident and successful kids.
What is up, everybody? Ed Gow Jr. here from Dad Central with
Drew Solon, the director for Dad Central Ontario.
You almost forgot your name. How could you do that?
No, I was just waiting for the unique intro that we were going to do this morning. So I always want to give you space, Ed, to make sure you get in there.
Hey, you know what? Giving space is very important. Brave and safe space is really good. How you keeping these days?
Doing as well as I can. I think it's the fall. Lots going on in the fall. Kids are back to activities. So, managing schedules can be challenging through the fall, but doing as well as we can. And how about you?
Absolutely. Yeah, managing schedules. Always excited to be along the Dad Central Show journey, and always great conversations to come. We have another one coming today, but before we get to that, let's just say a big thanks to the Dad Central Show is sponsored by DoveMen Plus Care. DoveMen Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, and because when men care about themselves and others, there is positive impact. So always a big shout out to DoveMen Plus Care for their continued support of not only the Dad Central Show, but dads and fathers and families and caregivers all around the world. So excellent as always. And we have another new friend today, and it's someone that you've been, I wouldn't say stalking, but following for a long period of time.
Yeah, well, I have wanted to be the best dad that I can be for a long time, and I've been trying to find resources to support that. And so it's really an honor to be part of this journey and connect with somebody who I've actually been following and consuming resource from. So we're having Larry Hagner. He's the creator of the Dad Edge podcast on the show. As he describes himself, he's an imperfect father of 4 boys, but he's been doing that show since 2015. They've got over 1,000 episodes. Ultimately, he's just been a great, I think, advocate for fatherhood and seeing men become, I think the hashtag is live legendary. So looking forward to a legendary conversation. The final point I'll make is that he believes that he outkicked the coverage with his wife. And so we're going to hear more from Larry today, and I'm really excited for the conversation. So Larry, welcome to the show. It's a great honor to have you here.
It's great to be here. It's good to meet you guys. I love doing this work, and I really like doing this work with other men who are doing this work. I'll never forget. I had a good friend of mine, John Vroman. I don't know if you've known him or
yes, front row dads.
I'll never forget it, man. It was in 2016. He invited me to be a speaker at the Front Row Dad Retreat, and this is when Dad Edge was still Good Dad Project and that kind of thing. And at the time, he was just Front Row Foundation, John Vroman. He wasn't Front Row Dads at the time. And he pulls me aside. He's like, "Hey, man," he's like, "I've really been dreading this conversation." I was like, "What conversation?" He's like, I'm going to enter into the dad space. I'm going to start a podcast and a resource for dads. And, we've been friends for a while, and I feel like, like this is competition. And I was like, you do? I don't. And he's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "I don't." I was like, "Dude, how many billions of fathers are walking the earth? We can't possibly, even if it was just you and I serving these guys, it would be impossible. What we really need, John, is we need 100,000 John and Larrys doing this work. We don't need 2. I was like, I don't look at this as competition at all. We're just making the world a better place. And that's what it's all about. I love the work that you guys are doing too.
Well, I just want to ask, do you still talk with John?
Yeah.
Can you tell him to answer my messages? I've been reaching out to him periodically for the last few weeks, and I've been wanting for a while to have him on the Dad Central Show, because there's a number of fathers that he serves that I met, especially during the pandemic, and they said nothing but incredible things about him. So if you can put a good word in, we'd appreciate it.
I got you covered. You will have a response by the end of this week.
Bam. Wow. Okay, proceed. Drew, I'm done for today's show. God, you can take the rest now.
Well, that's great, Ed. No, we got to have you in the conversation. Thank you, Larry. I mean, I think that there's so much power in what you just said. Recognizing when we're all working together to achieve a similar outcome in terms of who we're serving, then I think you see a massive difference, right? I fully believe that's why I started doing this work, is that when you're able to change fathers and families for the better, and you become the best you can be, you're impacting the children and the next generation, right? You want to change the world, it really starts at home. And so to be able to join like-minded men on this journey, to partner with each other, support each other, and to see the collective impact when we're all pushing in that same direction, I think it can be very powerful. So I love the heart behind that message that you have, and to be able to do it more with more men is fantastic. So really great to see, and really honored that you chose to come and be on our show and be able to share a little bit more of your story. And that's really like where we like to start, is we love to get a little bit of the backstory. I think we all have unique elements to our own fatherhood journey, and it usually starts in our own childhood. And so maybe you can take us back. What were the early years like for you?
The early years were, I would say, this is where this entire journey has begun, was in the early years. You know, I grew up my entire childhood. If you look at my childhood from the time I was born till the time I was 18, if you look at my life in a fishbowl, half of it was spent with a father figure who is toxic. And there were several. It was a revolving door of just the same type of dude, just different name, different face. And there were several. So, and then there were also half my childhood was spent without. So there was that too. So there was abandonment, and then there was also toxicity. But that's where the whole journey started. I'm happy to give you any detail you want, but that is my journey in a nutshell in the early years.
I'm curious. Upon reflection, obviously you got to where you are now. What was worse, the toxicity or the abandonment?
Wow. Yeah, I've never been asked that question. And I don't even know why, as I reflect on it, like I feel like heaviness, even reflecting on it. I would say, let me just talk about both a little bit, because I think both are different, but both are definitely impactful. So, and I want to share one thing that's good out of it too, because through every struggle and through every crucible is good things, right? So my biological father and mother were married they were married, and then for 4 years, then they had me. They were just kids. They got married at like 21. They had me at like 25. Their marriage, I think, was already heading for divorce way before I was born. I was born, and then they split up. And I think, from what I understand, I still don't have a ton of detail around it. And to be quite honest, I don't have a ton of detail around it because I really don't care at this point. I'm trying not to overanalyze the past and what was done and what wasn't done and all this stuff. I'm just not worried about it anymore. But my dad did leave when I was 4, and I have no recollection of him whatsoever. I had no idea he even existed. When I was 4, my mom met a man, and I didn't know this, but behind closed doors, my dad signed over parental rights to that man. My mom got remarried when I was 5, and then that's why I have a different last name to this day than my biological father. They were married for 6 years. I was so happy in the very beginning of that, 5 years old. Dad had come into my life, and up to that point, I had no idea what the difference between a biological father and a stepdad was. I just thought, like, literally when I was little, I thought moms go out and find dads. Like, well, all my friends had dads, and I just assumed kids magically appeared and the moms go out and find dads. And my mom hadn't found mine yet, but I was so happy when she did. Like, that was my interpretation. They got married. My dad was a good man, my stepdad, but very abusive when he drank. My mom and him drank a lot. It wasn't uncommon for physical abuse to happen between he and my mom. They got in physical altercations, a lot of yelling, a lot of drinking. Cops were called to my house by the neighbors. That wasn't too terribly uncommon, but then again, like, that was my world, and that was normal then. I didn't think, here's the crazy thing, I didn't think it was really all that traumatic growing up. I just figured it was what it was, and that's what normal was. They got divorced when I was 10, and he's gone, left. Haven't interacted with him since. I found out about 9 years ago he died, actually. I had no idea. And I only found out because he left a house to me, like a really small house in the ghetto. And when the court clerk came and told me, hey, your dad died, he left you this house, I said, you can keep the house. I don't want it. And shut the door. Not in a rude way, but I said, I don't want any part of that. I was like, you can give it to the county. I don't care what you do with it, but I don't want it. And, but I started asking a lot of questions when I was 12. There was this space of when I was 10 and 12, my mom was dating a lot. So that was when the revolving door kind of started. And I just started asking my mom, I was like, wait a second, this guy didn't show up till I was 4. Where did I come from? And my mom told me, she's like, I was married before your dad. And I was like, I had no idea. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, for 4 years, you have another dad out there. We just don't see him. And of course I was like, why? She's like, he signed over parental rights. He wanted to leave. And that was that. I was like, well, where does he live? She's like, I don't know. Well, when I was 12, I had the opportunity to meet him. And it's kind of a long drawn out story. And just for time's sake, I won't really go into it, but it was not planned. It was totally by accident. And our worlds collided. And my dad was remarried at the time when I was 12. He had been remarried for a handful of years, 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And they lived 3 miles from us. Had no idea. And I was just overjoyed. Like, because I had just come off of my mom divorcing who I thought was my dad, and he was really abusive, and especially the last couple of years were really bad. So I was like overjoyed to be reunited with my dad. Immediately started calling him dad, wanted to see him all the time. He came to my little league games. His wife is very nice, 2-year-old half brother, another one on the way. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, feels normal. Like their home felt normal to me. And my dad hung out with me for like 5 months. I saw him all the time. And then it was about month 5 that something began to change just in his personality, like when I was around him, and I couldn't really pinpoint it. I just knew something was up. And the best way I can describe it being an adult now is we've all dated women in our lives. And we know that during the dating process, we've all dated somebody who's not into us anymore, but they haven't told us yet. But we know that conversation's coming. That's what it felt like. And I'll never forget picking up the phone one time when I was 12, and I was like, hey man, like what's going on? Like I don't see you as much. And when I do, something doesn't feel right. Like what's going on? And my dad basically was like, hey, it's me, it's not you. I don't really think I can do this anymore. I'm getting ready to have another son. And here's what I think happened. That sounds really cold, but I think my dad was trying to make the best decision he could at the time. He's only 35 years old at the time. He was trying to start over, and it felt very heavy to him. And he was trying to go through the complexities of his current wife, who he's still married to today, 40 something years later, having a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And he's like, wow, there was no book for that back then, right? Nobody was even talking about this stuff back then. And my dad was like, he kind of waved the white flag. I was like, this is too much. And he left again. That hurt. And I gave up on life, to be honest, at 12, 13 years old. I was in 8th grade. I gave up on school. I completely failed the 8th grade. I got straight Fs in every subject. I just didn't care anymore. I didn't do homework. I didn't care about tests. There were some tests I would turn in blank. Done. And my mom continued to date. I just got more and more lost. And I did 8th grade again. Got into actually a decent high school. I got into an all-boys Catholic college prep high school. And then went away to college, graduated college. I got my degree and really turned my life around. And my mom continued to date, though, just absolute toxic human beings. And married my college sweetheart. That's why I always say I'll kick my coverage, because she is just a saint. But here's where the story kind of culminates. I'm 30. So, I'm 47 right now. I'm 30 years old, recently married. My first son is on the way. Have a very successful, incredible, lucrative position in medical device sales. And every Monday at that point in my life, I would meet with my sales team at a Starbucks here in St. Louis. And I was just sitting there one day, and who came walking in to get his morning coffee but my father. And I knew exactly who he was when he walked in. Exactly. There was no question about it. And one of the women I was with that I worked with looked at me, and she saw this look on my face, and she's like, are you okay? Like, you just look like you've seen a ghost. And I was like, yeah. I was like, sorry. I was like, and I just said it nonchalantly. I was like, my father just walked in here to get his coffee, I think. And she's like, I'm sorry, what? I was like, my father just walked in to get a coffee, I guess. And she's like, the one you haven't seen since you were 12? And I was like, yeah, it's him. She goes, oh my God, where is he? I was like, he's right there. like 50 feet away. She's like, oh my God, like, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? And I was like, nothing. And she's like, wait, what? She goes, you're going to let your father, who you haven't seen in 18 years, walk out of here without saying one word? And I'm like, yeah, that's the plan. Like, there's nothing to say. Well, she didn't even hesitate. She didn't even say a word. She just got up from the table and walked over to him and sat at his table. And I was like, what in God? And all of a sudden they started talking. I was like, what is she saying? What are they doing? What is happening right now? My heart was racing so fast. I was like, do I get up and hit this guy? Do I get up and leave? Do I go to the bathroom? What do I do? And my dad got up, made eye contact with me. And here he came walking over very humbly, extended his hand. He's like, hey, you know, he's like, man, he's like, I make my dad sound like a bum. He's not. He's a very successful entrepreneur. He shook my hand. He goes, man, he's like, how are you doing? And I'm like, fine. How are you? I wasn't nice, but I wasn't a total jerk either. He's like, he saw my wedding band. He's like, are you guys married? He's talking about me and the woman I was with. I was like, no, she works for me. I was like, I'm married though. I actually have a son on the way. And he's like, oh man, that's great. He's like, well, what are you guys doing? Like, how long have you been married? And where'd you go to college? Like, what do you do for a living? And I answered all of his questions. And then he's like, you know, we should really get together. And I was like, you don't have to do this, man. I think I even said that. I was like, you don't have to do this. He's like, no. I want to. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what. Here's my card. Because in 2005, we didn't really have the smartphones yet. I was like, here's my card. You want to contact me? There it is. I didn't expect to hear from him. The next day I woke up to this long email. I'm talking long, like a dissertation. And I love Jim Gaffigan. I'm a huge fan of his stuff. He has that joke about like when somebody sends you like a book over email, he's like, I can't read this dissertation now. I'm going to save that as new. Right. But I read it and it was very humbling. And my dad basically was like, regret, you know, like I should have never let you go once. And then I did again when you were 12. It's haunted me every day since. And if you'll have me, I'd really love to have a relationship with you. Still married to the same woman. I have 2 younger half brothers. Got a great relationship. Mm-hmm. But that was my childhood. That was the journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Larry. Thank you for being just so vulnerable and honest in what you shared. I could sense quite a few things just as you were going through that journey and that story. I mean, there's so many things I could pick up on, and I'm sure there's many that you might want to pick up on. But I'm gonna just say I'm so curious to know what that reconnection has been like for you with your father, and what it means for you now. Like, as you're a father, you've got 4 boys yourself. Like, what does that mean to have that relationship brought back to you?
Man, that's a great question. What it means to me to have that relationship brought back. I would say there's a couple of themes that I've really learned, a couple of lessons I've learned. And that is, one is forgiveness is a choice. A lot of people think, well, I can't forgive. Well, yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. I could, I'll never forget a conversation my dad and I had. This was early on. I was so excited to have him back in my life, and him and his wife, and I had 2 younger half brothers, and it was such a positive experience. And in the background, there was lingering, like, what in God's name, especially as I had my kids, right? I think we were hanging out for, I don't know, a year or 2. And I asked my dad to dinner, and my dad knew exactly why I was asking him to dinner. Asked him to dinner. He sat down. We just kind of basically, shot the stuff for a little bit. And then my dad looked at me and goes, so why are we here? What do you need to ask me? And I just bluntly told him, I said, listen, it's been great getting to know you. I want to keep this I want to keep this relationship going the way it is, which is really good. I even want to elevate it even more. But I also have to understand what happened, and I'm just going to ask you very bluntly, what the hell happened, man? You left once, right? I was like, I have boys. That would never happen on my watch, number 1. Number 2, you signed over parental rights when I was 4. Why? Then I was reunited with you when I was 12. You did it again. Why? My dad took a deep breath. I didn't know what to expect, to be honest, like how he was going to respond to that. I expected maybe there was a part of him that would be defensive, justify it, defend it. Instead, I was met with nothing more than humility. And I saw not just my dad, but a man who had been holding on to regret and a history of bad choices, and how much that just aided him. And with tears in his eyes, he said, "It's the worst mistake I ever made once." And then I did it again when you were 12. He goes, "If I can explain anything, though, it was wrong." He goes, "But me leaving when you were a baby," he's like, "it was so bad with me and your mom. And all you wanted to do was be with your mom. So every time I come to," he's like, "You don't remember this." He's like, "But every time I come to pick you up, you just screamed. You didn't want to go with me. You wanted to be with your mom." He's like, "So I, being a 25-year-old guy, a kid, I thought like, well, maybe I shouldn't see this kid. It just does him more damage." And then he's like, "And when I signed parental rights over," he's like, "that was the darkest day of my life." He's like, "You can ask his wife, which is still married to." He's like, "I sobbed for probably 24 hours straight." He's like, "But I thought I was giving you a better life. I had no idea this guy was a crazy loose cannon like he was, and you're being abused and all this other stuff." And he's like, "I thought I was doing the right thing." He goes, "And then when you were 12, that was so dumb." He goes, "But I had no idea what else to do." He's like, "Me and your mom are really butting heads because she was really trying to make the situation harder than it was." He's like, "I had, my wife pregnant, 2-year-old son, starting my business. Like, I just thought, like, what in God's name am I doing? Am I doing more harm than good again?" And that's why I made that decision. He goes, "It was the worst thing I ever did." He goes, "You know what? I've had to carry that forever, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He goes, "All I can tell you is that will never happen again, ever." And here we are 17 years later, and it hasn't. But in that moment, my dad and I made a decision, and this is where I would tell people in the audience, if you're holding on to a grudge, that's a choice. A lot of people will be like, "I have no choice." You do have a choice. My dad and I made an oath that day. We were like, let's not talk about this anymore. We don't have to explore it. We don't have to analyze it. We don't have to have beef about it. We don't know how much time we have on this earth, but let's make the time that we have the best that we possibly can and just see what we can do moving forward. And that's what we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Larry, for sharing that. Again, real authentic story. Forgiveness. I think it's something so powerful, but so hard to do. But I love your very practical approach of, okay, we faced it head on, we dealt with it, and then we made a choice. We're not going to look back. We're going to move forward to the relationship we want to create. And you both committed to that. And obviously 17 years later, it's producing what it is. So, man, really loving just the realness of this conversation, and you're sharing about that, the real pain. And I think many of your listeners, I can relate to that pain. I can feel similar pain from, my broken relationship and having to make that choice to forgive my father for what he had done as well. But why don't we talk, Ed, do you want to hop in, or can we maybe shift the conversation a little bit?
We can shift the conversation. No problem.
All right. Well, let's talk about you as a dad, Larry. And then I'd really want to get into more the Dad Edge podcast and some of the key things that are part of what you've been doing and the impact you're bringing to men and dads everywhere. But what about becoming a dad? How did you manage any fears or any challenges that came up in that process because of some of the history that you've described to us so far?
Well, one thing I can tell you is what we focus on grows, right? And I'll tell you, I wasted the first 6 years of me being a dad in that camp of trying to avoid and things that I didn't want versus the things that I wanted. The other thing that I wasn't really prepared for is I knew when I had kids, even before kids, I was like, I had such a crazy childhood growing up. My kids will not experience anything like this. My kids will know their dad. I'll be a part of their lives. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do this the best way I can. and I have a laundry list of things of what not to do, right? I have all these experiences of what not to do. And I thought that was enough. And what I'll tell you is that wasn't enough. The last time I went to Lowe's and I bought a barbecue pit, which was actually in the summertime, when I opened the instruction manual to put the thing together, it didn't give me 100 ways to not put it together. And then it said, best of luck. It gave me the directions on how to put it together and what the end result would look like. And that's why I say what we focus on grows. So if I'm focusing on like, I can't hit my kids out of anger. I can't be an impatient father. I can't be this person who's not present. What we focus on will expand. In other words, those things that I'm trying to avoid will actually be more likely to come to fruition. And if you don't believe me, don't think of an elephant right now. So whatever you do, for the love of God, whatever you do, don't think of an elephant right now. And of course, that's what you're thinking of. The brain doesn't hear not. So instead of focusing on everything I didn't want, what I've learned over the years now and doing this work and coaching other men is you have to focus on what it is that you do want, right? And we see this all the time when people are trying to break bad habits, right? If you try to focus on, which right now I'm heading up a 365-day alcohol-free challenge for a lot of our guys who are at the summit. One thing I told them, the more you try to avoid alcohol, the more you're going to want it. Instead, if you're focusing on like how healthy your mind feels, how healthy your body feels, what it feels like to be fully present, not numbed out, what it feels like to wake up with a clear head and not a hangover. Those are the things that you will focus on, right? Versus like, I can't have alcohol, and that's all you'll want.
Yeah. I love the practicality. I'm a coach as well, and I've heard what you focus on grows very much, and I use it in coaching conversations. But so can you talk maybe a little bit about, it sounds very skill, like that's an important skill. And when you are wanting to be a better dad or the dad that you hope for, what's my question here? I think, how did you make that become habit? How did you be able to shift it? Because it sounds like you weren't always able to do that.
It really boils down to learning skills and tactics, right? Skills and tactics are a way of doing. And then over time, because you do the skills and the tactics over and over again, it becomes a way of being, right? So like think about anything that we do well, anything at all we do well, we learn it. It becomes a tactical practice, and then it becomes just a way of being. So like for this, I'm sure you guys have probably heard this, or you probably even thought about it yourself. It was something I realized just a few years ago. And it was just this realization of like, oh my gosh, like no wonder. So like, for instance, in order for you to have a driver's license, you have to study the road. You have to go through a permit process. You have to learn how to do it. You have to learn the skills of driving. And then you've got to go prove it by taking a written test and then a practical test where, a cop is driving with you and they sign off and say, yes, you are now worthy to have your license. You've learned the skills, tactically know how to do it. Well, when you're 16 years old, I have a 16-year-old right now, tactically trying to teach him how to drive. So he's doing everything. Over time, though, driving becomes not necessarily something you do, but you can almost kind of be it, meaning you don't have to think about it. I don't get in the car and be like, okay, I need to compress the brakes. I need to turn the ignition. I need to check my rearview mirrors before I hit reverse and then slowly back out. I don't think of it that way. I just do it now. Because it's ingrained in me. Same thing with anything that we learn. So like a surgeon, right? We don't just wake up one day and say, hey, today you're a surgeon, best time of your whole life. Don't worry, you'll figure it out. We're going to give you a scalpel. We're going to put this patient under. You're going to do an open heart surgery today. I know you haven't been through medical school, but don't worry, best time of your whole life. You'll figure it out. They have to go through 8 years of schooling, then 2 years of residency and fellowship, and then they can cut somebody open, right? Same thing with it doesn't matter if you're in the Canadian military or the US military. There is tactical training that has to be done to make sure that candidate or that cadet can be a warrior or soldier. When you become a father or a husband, there is no training. It's, oh yeah, best time of your whole life. You'll figure it out. Your kids, they pop out. Best time of your whole life. Don't worry, you'll figure it out. And a lot of times our blueprint is how we were raised, right? Or our blueprint is who we hang out with, right? It's about our circle. And most men do not have the right circle of friends. They're not surrounded by the right people. So you take that all together, and then we scratch our heads wondering, why are marriages such a disaster? Why is parenting such a disaster? Why is the mindset of men when it comes to these two topics, why is it so defeating? Well, no wonder. I mean, I had a conversation with Frankie Edgar, he's a UFC legend. He actually holds the record in the UFC for the most amount of minutes in the cage of any fighter, as long as they've had the UFC. He was on my podcast, and then he invited me up to New Jersey to go be on his. And he and I were joking about this. I'm 165 pounds. I'm 6'1". Frankie Edgar's 5'5", 135 pounds. And just for giggles, I asked him to do a toe-to-toe with me, a face-off, where the fighters are toe-to-toe with you. And I just wanted to see, I was like, what does it look like? Because we only see the side view. What does it look like when you're toe-to-toe with these guys? And I did it, and he turned it on, and I was terrified. Just the look in his eyes, and he had to look up at me. I was like, this guy could literally run right through me and destroy me in under 7 seconds without a problem. But here's what we joked about. I was like, you know what, Frankie? I was like, here's the crazy thing about fatherhood and marriage and all this stuff. If I were to fight you in the cage, right? If I were to go say, hey, me and you, tomorrow morning, and you pummeled me in under 10 seconds, everybody would be like, well, dude, what'd you expect? You didn't train. You had no idea what you were doing. You went up against a pro. Of course you got pummeled. Like, why wouldn't you have gotten pummeled? In fact, I'm actually shocked you lasted 10 seconds. Now, if I went away and I trained for 3 solid months, right? Probably still beat me. He absolutely would beat me, right? But maybe I would last 3 minutes instead of 10 seconds, right? Still probably get pummeled, but maybe I defend myself a little bit better. Maybe I might get some licks in. I might do better than just going in totally cold. But that's what I'll tell you, that's what marriage is. That's what fatherhood is. It's going in and trying to face a UFC champion with zero training and expecting, for some crazy reason we expect it, well, I should be better. And then to add insult to injury, we start to have all these other thoughts of like, well, maybe I'm just not worthy. Maybe I'm just not good at this. I'm just not natural at it. We say this crap to ourselves all the time. I'm just not a good communicator. I'm just not a patient father. I'm just not this. I'm just not that. And all the while, it was like, you didn't go get your training. You didn't learn tactically what to even do. Had you do that, if we were able to do that, man, the world would change overnight.
Yeah. Powerful analogy, powerful story, and just visual of it. You got to commit. You got to do the work. You got to learn the skills, and you got to be willing to silence those negative voices that are telling you, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I mean, I'm just, keep doing the work, putting in the reps, putting in the effort, putting in the time. Absolutely. Great message.
Can I add one just small
tweak?
The small tweak that I'll add, and this came from a really good mentor of mine, and it was the same thing. I was like, how do I quiet these voices? He's like, the first step is knowing you can't quiet the voices. The more you try to quiet them, the louder they're going to get. And he's like, have you ever tried to do that? Like, just stop saying that to yourself. Just stop doing that, or stop thinking that. What do you do? And I was like, I just think about it more. It's like, don't think of an elephant. He's like, instead, recognize the voice for what they are, and they're going to come. The demons want to come out and play. They'll mess with you. There's no other way around it. The only thing you can do is tactically learn skills on how to turn that volume down and look at it for what it is. So, like, for instance, anytime I start, a thought comes in of like, I'm just not a patient father. Like, oh yeah, there it is. There it is. Yep, I see it, and I know what it is. It's my own human brain trying to protect me, trying to do this, trying to do that. But you know what? I am a patient father. I'm just not exercising it right now, but here's what I need to do to go do it.
Yeah. Thank you. Very important, especially I think for a lot of men. Ed, you gonna hop in here?
Yeah, I know we're eventually going to talk about the podcast, but as I've been listening to you share, I'd like to know, especially, with your father and the story you shared with us with your father, How impactful or how important is humility in your fatherhood journey?
It is an absolute cornerstone, like an absolute cornerstone. Humility is a muscle that I exercise every single day. And that's because if you're a father and you're humble, like, and you don't know exactly what to do, or you have a bad moment and you own it, that sends a beautiful message to your kids. I had an interaction with my 14-year-old. You know, I actually taught a master class on how to create more resilience and patience, basically how to be a more patient father. So when you talk about imposter syndrome, when I lose my patience on my kids, because it does still happen, I sit there and think, for the love of God, I'm only taught a class on this, right? But my batting average is higher, but still mess up. But here's what I'll tell you about being humble. When we are humble, we teach and encourage other men to be the same. And here's the other thing too. When we're humble, we teach our kids humility and how to be humble. And how that really shows up is I have four boys, but I have 14 and 16-year-old. Here's the really cool thing. I will apologize to my boys all the time. Like if I did something wrong, I will take full on ownership for it. I'll give you a great example. My 16-year-old, we were at Buffalo Wild Wings yesterday. My 16-year-old thought the waitress was cute. I was like, dude, you should talk to her. And of course, he didn't want to. So I thought it'd be funny, right? I thought we'd all get and it was the whole family who was with us. I nudged my 8-year-old and I was like, hey, ask the waitress if she has a boyfriend and if she, and let her know that your brother is interested in her. So the 8-year-old did that. And she, the waitress was like, oh, it's so sweet. She's like, but I do have a boyfriend or whatever. And my oldest son goes, that wasn't funny. And we're all like laughing and cutting up. He's like, that wasn't funny. And I was like, come on, man. I was like, it's kind of cool. And he's like, it wasn't funny. And then I took my other son somewhere else later that day. And my wife texted me. She's like, hey, I just want to let you know, Ethan is really upset about that. He was really embarrassed. And he's really upset. Like he's kind of hurt. And I was like, ooh, I didn't know that. And I started to think about it. I was like, well, of course he is. Why wouldn't he? Like his old man like messed with him with this beautiful waitress. And yeah, that was dumb. So I went up to him when I got home and I was like, I owe you a huge apology, man. He's like, why? And I was like, that's what I did. I know you're upset about it and you have every right to be upset about it because that was dumb. That was really dumb. I thought it was funny at the time. Full ownership. That was not funny. And I can understand why you didn't think it was. I am so sorry, man. That will not happen again. And I do apologize. And that boy gave me a big hug and he's like, it's okay. It's all right. I get it. And he's like, I forgive you. And I was like, no excuses, man. That was not good. Now here's what I'll tell you. I do that kind of stuff a lot when I screw up. I screw up a lot. And the cool thing about that is my boys do the exact same thing. I never, very, very rarely, I will never say never, but very rarely do I ever have a problem that when my kids do something wrong, that they play the blame game or it was this excuse or that excuse or this didn't happen or that didn't happen. Normally it's met with like, yeah, I totally did that. Yep. That's on me. I'm sorry. And here's how I'll fix it. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that um, I practice it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Want to ask you in regards to the Dad Edge podcast. Can you tell us the story of how it got started, and how did you start this journey of the Dad Edge podcast?
It's fascinating you're asking right now because as we're recording, it's October 24th. And so we literally just got done. We just came off of the Dad Edge Summit, which is our 4th annual Dad Edge Summit. We had over 200 guys there. It was by far the best one we've had yet. I mean, so many guys had amazing breakthroughs. Like it was the highest energy. We left that event and 70% of the tickets for next year are already sold. Like that's never happened at a summit. We normally sell some tickets for the following event, but this year was off the charts. Now, how the podcast got started. So you go to Facebook, right? You go to your memories and memories pop up. So back in 2014 on October 24th, I was at a Tony Robbins event in Dallas. And at the time, Good Dad Project / Dad Edge was just a blog. Just a blog. I was blogging a lot, and the blog wasn't getting hardly any traction. It was just more like therapy for me. And then I wrote in that workbook, I really want to take this thing to the next level. And I literally wrote in my workbook, I'm going to start a podcast and publish my first book by September in 2015. And both of those things happened. The podcast happened in April of 2015. And then my book, The Dad Edge, launched, the first book, in September. But here's why I did it. I felt like through blogging, I was doing a lot of reflective work, a lot of learning, right, through experience. But I was always learning through experience, but I couldn't really, I wasn't learning the lessons that I needed to learn for the future. I was basically reflecting on lessons I learned now or in the past when I was blogging on those. I was like, man, how do I learn and get ready for the things to come, not just the things I'm experiencing? And I had a good friend of mine, Sean Stevenson, who is still obviously he's a force to be reckoned with now. But at the time, the Model Health show that he was hosting wasn't all that big yet, and his book Sleep Smarter wasn't out yet. And he and I were really good friends. And I told him, I was like, "Hey, I want to start a podcast with Good Dad Project, and to be honest, I'd love to have a co-host. You want to do it with me?" And he was all in. Well, we started that podcast because I wanted to learn and talk to high-level people. You know, like these Navy SEALs and these celebrities and these people that are gurus in their field with parenting and marriage and all this stuff. I was like, I want to learn from them, like, and talk to them, not just blog about it. But that's why it came out, and that's why we did it.
Well, I'm glad that you got started. I'm glad that Tony Robbins, that experience inspired you, because it's been a big part of kind of my journey as well. And I'm sure there are probably thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of other men who have had that same experience as a result of the work you're doing. So I just want to, before we even get to the end, just say a big thank you for the work that you're doing, continue to do. But I'm also curious. I think one of the questions I want to know is about the show, because you've had over 700 conversations, 1,000 episodes. What conversation or show stands out the most to you, and why?
Boy, so many of them stand out for different reasons. I'll use one in particular, and that is, so I had Matthew McConaughey on, and I just use him as not because of his name or something like that. You know, I mean, to me that was a pivotal interview for Dad Edge, just because, you know, it just shows that no matter how you're operating, even at that high celebrity level like that, we all put our pants on the same way. Hmm. And I was so excited to have that interview with Matthew, and I expected a lot out of it, and I got a lot out of it. But here was one really cool thing I got out of it. It was unexpected humility on his part. And here's what I'll tell you. So I asked him, it was halfway through the interview, I said, hey, share with me how you elevate your marriage with Camilla. Like, what do you do to constantly keep that marriage fresh, on point? You guys really seem like you're in love. So what do you do? Now, Matthew McConaughey can say anything and we'd all believe him because he's Matthew McConaughey. And yet that man took a deep breath, and he could have lied through his teeth. He took a deep breath. He goes, he's like, man, that's a tough one. And you want to know why? He's like, the question's not tough, but my thoughts are tough. He's like, I got to tell you and just be real honest, I'm not in a very good season with that at all right now. He's like, I'm so busy finishing up Sing 2 because we're doing that. He's like, I've got a couple other projects on the horizon I can't talk about. You know, the book's doing really, really good. The kids are, you know, so many activities. And be honest, I've put my marriage on the back burner a little bit. Not to say we're not in love and we're not united, but man, I haven't taken my wife out on a date night in a long time. He's like, I didn't even realize that until you asked me that question. He goes, so right now I'm in a season where I need a kick in my butt. And you asking me that question is a strong reminder. I'm taking my wife out on a date tonight. And I thought to myself, that guy could have said anything. Polished. He's an actor, so he can ad lib, but he was honest. And I was like, that is freaking, that made me just love the guy even more, right? That the fact it wasn't a polished answer. He's just a human being. And he reminds us all, no matter what level we're working at or how great somebody looks or what they're doing in the world, it ain't perfect. And we all put our pants on the same way. And as long as we are willing to be like, hey, that part of my life is actually not getting the TLC that it really needs right now, I'm going to go do that. That's a cool thing. So that was definitely one that I thought was just great. I would say the other, I've had, I think I've had 34 Navy SEALs on the podcast now. And I'm always so fascinated by the things that they talk about and how they have taken their training on resilience and mental toughness and just, going out and just killing life, but doing that as a father and husband, and also what those guys do to recalibrate when they have a dark moment or a dark time, because they're not immune to that either. They're just able to recover a lot faster than us. But I would say those are two of the conversations. Those are two of the types of conversations that I've enjoyed the most.
Ed.
Well, you know what? It's interesting just talking about your podcast. How often do you go in with pre-designed questions, and how often do you just go in with a conversation?
99% of the time it's a conversation. I've learned through experience that if I try to stay on agenda, like the things that I want to talk about and all this other stuff to be pre-planned, the less authentic the conversation is. Like I had Warren Farrell who on the podcast.
Yeah, I've interviewed him a number of times.
Yeah, he's so good. And his podcast just released today. And I did some homework on Warren, but I also was like, this guy's a human being. I want to get to this man's heart, right? Now, luckily, I've had a great deal of training in what's called appreciative inquiry. It's a skill set to have conversations, to ask good questions, to bring out the best in people or their most authentic selves, right? And I got to tell you, I had Warren on, and in the first 15 minutes, the man was in tears, and he even apologized. He's like, "I'm sorry, I don't get emotional on these podcasts." He's like, but your questions, like, it just, oh my gosh, it made me just think about these things and reflect. He was talking about his mom and how important she was to him. And I think the follow-up question I was like, what are one or two things you can think of that were just so meaningful to you growing up that she did or she taught you? And that's when he just cried. And I don't like to do anything prescripted because I'm very intentional about watching the person I'm interviewing and seeing what really brings them to life and lights them up. And I can tell when we're on the cusp of something that is truly important to them and truly emotional to them, maybe even. And I go deeper on that. I don't just brush it off and get to my next question. There's something beautiful that's going to emerge out of what that guest is going to say. And we got to get to it.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Drew.
I feel like that piece of wisdom is just so powerful. But I love the what's the phrase about the inquiry? The
appreciative inquiry.
Appreciative inquiry. Yeah, I love that phrase. It really captures the essence of, what I receive is, appreciating the person, focusing on them, and then just following where their energy is and where they're passionate about. And so really important. And I don't know, hopefully we've been able to model a little bit of that today. I'm not sure. We're going to have to work on that, Ed. That skill set is something we want as hosts for sure to get to. As you said, there's something really, maybe it was beautiful or powerful or something very important that guest has to share with the audience. And that's what we want to get to for sure.
It's about giving a safe and brave space. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So I'm curious now, because you have worked with so many dads, you've had such experience. You've mentioned the Navy SEALs and just how they're able to navigate that life that they live, but also the realities of the dark times, but also being a husband and a father, et cetera. In your work with dads, what have you found to be the area that you think they either need the most support, or makes the biggest difference for them when you see them? Totally.
So we have actually great diehard data on that. So Dad Edge Alliance, which is our mastermind community, you have to apply to be a part of that group. And the application process just allows us to get to know you, what is on your mind and heart. What is it that has your attention, right? We've we have 800 guys that do life with us. And I would say over the past 6 years, we've had, a couple thousand at least that have come through, they have come in and done the work. They leave. Some of them stay for we've had guys in there who stayed all 6 years. But we have great data on that. The thing that's on the mind and hearts of men mostly is how to elevate their marriage through conversational excellence. Basically, that's a complicated way that most men want to learn how to communicate with their wives. What they don't realize is that there's a couple things going on. Men and women communicate differently. Neither one is neither bad nor good. We just communicate differently. Men, are problem solvers. We're fixers. Women are emotional, and they talk to us because they want to connect, not because they want to solve their problem. But when we teach men conversational excellence and how to elevate connection, communication, intimacy with their wife, that changes the game for them. So if I teach a man hey, here's how I'm going to rattle these things off. And if they sound completely foreign to your audience, that's a really good sign, because it's not a really good sign, but it's a sign. We're not taught these things. If you're going to go be a doctor, you're going to go take anatomy and physiology, you're going to take chemistry, you're going to take biology, you're going to take these things, right? When you get married, you're hey, don't worry, you'll figure it out. You guys will talk just fine, blah, blah, blah. You need to learn skills like tactical empathy. You need to understand how to use your voice tone. Voice tone, you can have a voice tone of condescension, or you can have a voice tone of curiosity and appreciation. And there's ways to do that. If you don't know the skill set of mirroring, using things like using emotional labels, being able to label what your wife is most likely feeling. If you don't know the skill set of generative questions, right? Generative questions generate ideas. It generates connection. It generates safety, an environment of psychological safety, or even a vision for your marriage and what it's going to look like. What are you celebrating a year from now, 5 years from now? And operating within your core values. If all those sound foreign to you, those are the things that we teach guys. So when they're able to use a skill like generative questions, that's a layup. It's an easy one, but most of us have no idea how to do it. When you know how to use generative questions with your wife, and I'll give you an example of one, don't ever ask your wife how her day was. Don't ever do that again. In fact, if you're an audience member listening to this show, don't ever go home and ask your wife, how was your day? Instead, say this: what has been the best part of your day, and tell me why it was so meaningful to you. Now, she might look at you like you have two heads because she's been used to you for 20 years asking, how was your day? But when you do that, what you're doing is you're guiding your wife into a generative mind state where she has to think about the gratitude in her day or something she was most excited about, and she gets to share it with you. And what do we do when we share something that's exciting or meaningful with somebody else? It brings us up, and it also elevates the connection. It's almost like, Drew, man, I can't wait to tell you what just happened yesterday. You're not going to believe it, man. Right? That's the end. It's not necessarily that level, but we're like, hey, man, yeah, I got to tell you about this thing. Immediately I feel more connected to you, right? So generative questions is a huge one. If you can, even if you're, and to use that with your kids, right? What are you most excited about tomorrow? That's a generative question. It's so easy. But when I ask my kids, what are you most excited about tomorrow? I get a look into their world of what's going on for them the next day. If they tell me Dad, I'm going to run the mile tomorrow for our fitness test. I'm so excited. I've been training for it. I want to beat so-and-so. I want to beat my time. I'm so excited about it. What do you think I'm going to ask him when he gets home? First question. Hey, man, tell me about the mile, in that voice tone. How did it go? Right? Versus hey, man, how was your day? I'm going to get a boring, crazy, it was okay, or fine, or good. But the skill of generative questions, oh my gosh, will it elevate the connection you have with people?
So good. Thank you, Larry. Ed, you want to hop in?
Yeah. What do you feel what have you seen make the biggest difference for men and dads that you've worked with?
It's that I've worked with. Here's the funny thing. I'll be really honest. I work with one-on-one clients. That's one way that I work. And it's I teach men very tactical skill sets on how to elevate their marriage. That's one of my specialties. That's what I love to do. And that's what brings me to life. And when I see other men doing those things, oh my gosh, does it bring me life to see their results, right? But here's the other thing too. I don't like to say this is a me thing, right? Because you asked, what do I enjoy, or what do I do? Or the Dad Edge is a community. It's a movement. It's a mission right now of, if I look at all of our social media, it's over 100,000 guys. If I look at guys in our mastermind, it's almost 1,000. But it's the community and the men that these men are surrounded by. It's not me. And we're all like-minded. And here's the like-minded part. We're all imperfect. We're all hungry. We do not like comfort. We are hungry to learn new things, to live legendary. That's why also my hat says change the game. That's the new one. Change the game of fatherhood. But when we're surrounded by the right people, right? Other people who share that vision, share that hunger, that desire, and also realize like, hey, there's gonna be peaks and valleys with this. And when I fall down, I need a place to go. And like we call it when bullets fly, right? When bullets fly, when things happen, hey man, come get coverage. We got your back. We have almost 1,000 men strong. We got your back. When you're going through a dark time, let us run some cover for you. Come back, recalibrate. We'll help you. We'll strategize and get back on it, right? Because here's the other thing too. Once that man gets recalibrated and he's good, he's got some coverage and he goes back, what's going to happen? He's going to have a brother in arms, right? Who's going to go through the same thing. And then he's going to be helping run that coverage. But yeah, I would say it's not me. It's the guys in our community.
It's great. Thank you, Larry. And thank you so much. This conversation, I think, has given me a lot. I feel challenged in some areas, and I also feel convicted to be able to just move forward in some of the skills and learning skills, applying the skills that you've talked about. So I think it's just been a real honor to have you on the show. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing with us, and for talking to us about the power of that community, and knowing that your community continues to grow strong and continue to grow and impact men. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you back. Appreciate you.
And if people want to find out more, where can they go?
Best place is you can just Google Dad Edge. It's super easy, or you can go to the dadedge.com podcast. You can find that absolutely everywhere now at this point. If you're interested in the Alliance and our Dad Edge Alliance, you can go to the dadedge.com/alliance. It's the best place. You got to apply, even meet with somebody on our team. But everything we do has a personal touch. There's a reason we do that. So, if you just search the Dad Edge, you'll find everything. I think you'll find everything that we do. We're not hard to find.
Well, excellent. Well, we'd like to thank you from the Dad Central podcast family for sharing all the hard work that you and your team are and will be doing. And also thanks for having Canadian support. We found out before we went live, you got two brothers in arms from London, Ontario that are helping create this wonderful community and changing dads, fathers, and families. So appreciate that. And we don't take it for granted. So be well. And remember to give yourself grace, and don't just manage your time, manage your energy.
Love that.
All right. Take care.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye. All right. Epic conversation there. What'd you take home from it?
I love Larry's focus on skills and being able to apply those skills in the context, but also developing those skills to the point where they become a little bit more habitual. The final point about the community, I love the term, if you're on, I think it was come and get coverage. Basically, right? So like, I think it's the reference probably from the military and all the people that he's interviewed who are Navy SEALs, but being under fire as life can come, you feel like you're under fire, then to come get coverage, be part of a community where you can get renewed, restored, and just what you need to be able to then go back out and get into the fight. So skills and coverage is what I take away from that great conversation.
Good stuff. Number of things to take away, but I think the fatherhood and humility, especially the humility of his dad to say, you know what, I messed up, and being honest with his son and saying, I've messed up. Can you give me another chance? Being that humility. And I think that's a very powerful point that, if you're a dad or a caregiver, use humility. Use humility. It's the best way. Not only will it impact in you, but through you, and also it will impact your kids and your family going forward. So that's one of the things I'll certainly take away from the conversation. So another epic conversation is done on the Dad Central Show. As always, want to say the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when a man care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. If you want to touch base with us, we'd love to hear from you. The good, the bad, and I don't hope ugly, but whatever you have to say, no problem. Email us at podcast@dadcentral.com. Even if you have guest father or caregiver suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. Also, if you want to listen or watch the show, dadcentral.ca/podcast. And we have piles of free resources for you in regards to parenting. So go to our website, dadcentral.ca. As always, we like to say, remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. And we'll see you soon. Be well and keep the faith. Bye-bye.